Hello there, welcome back to Empathetic Educators. I'm your host, Naomi Toland, and I'm very excited. You can see that we've changed the colour scheme today because we're going back to my hometown from Derry, and we have a guest coming on from my hometown. So I'm excited to have Shane McIvor on the show today. So without further ado, let's get ourselves started. So we are back with our segment of Empathetic Educators, hashtag 21st century _jobs. And I have been putting this, we started it maybe 2 weeks ago with our first guest, Daniel, and he was kind of talking about how his job is in digital transformational leadership. And I just wanted to bring on a different perspective today and also bring on a friend. So that's really exciting to have a doctor's point of view, because I want to see some new jobs and innovative jobs and making connections between maybe more traditional jobs and how the innovation comes in there as well. So we have our second guest in this segment on, and it is Shane McIvor. Hello.
Or good evening, wherever you are.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And it actually is your morning. I'm very happy, even though you are a doctor and you said that you do shift work. I'm very grateful that you can come on today and have this chat. So yeah, introduce yourselves. Let us know where you are. Let us know a bit about you and yeah, what you do.
It's my pleasure to be on. So I'm Shane. I have been, this is my 4th year now working as a doctor. I've currently been working in intensive care for the last over a year and a half now. I'm based in Manchester, work just outside Manchester. So yeah, that's sort of, I guess that's where I'm going towards, is sort of intensive care anesthetic medicine as such. So yeah, that's
a little bit about you.
And me, I was going to say that's me on a professional level.
I know. I think that's what's so weird, isn't it? It's like, we're teachers and we're doctors, and then we're like, we know each other from such, like, from day dot. It's so crazy that, like, this is what we're talking about. We said before, we're having our professional hats on today, Shane, and that's very different from maybe some of what our friends see us in different ways. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been I moved over to England for university. It's actually now, I was just saying to you, I can't believe it's actually coming up 10 years now since I moved over. So it doesn't feel like 10 years since I left Ireland, I'll tell you that much.
Crazy.
But yeah, so I was in London for university, and then moved up to Manchester when I finished uni, started working, which was, I mean, it's a great place. If you're ever in the area, you should definitely try and hit up Manchester. It's great fun. Obviously at the minute it's slightly different, but we'll brush past that.
I think that's what's actually really cool to have you on board, because it has been the past 2020, 2021, we're still in the COVID sphere, and obviously you're in the front line with that. So how's that been for you, and how have you, I think the theme of this season, just to give you a bit of background as well, I know that you watched the last show, but our themes, this one is accountability and challenge. And so, like, facing challenges and how that helps you grow, and facing challenges, see how you deal with it mentally, and how so you facing the challenges of this year, how does that help you grow, maybe professionally or personally, even with your job?
Yeah, I think challenging, to say the least, from, I guess, probably the most challenging aspect of the last year was probably more, and especially for my colleagues as well, was more on a personal level. I guess professionally, you can do your job, you can go in, you know what you have to do, you know what you need to do, and you can process it like that. However, from a mental health perspective, that's probably the most challenging aspect for anybody who's working in that sort of environment in the last year. And it's only sort of recently that even among colleagues, even just Saturday morning, we were just discussing the sort of impact that it's had on everybody's psychological, I guess, well-being. And now they are actually putting in sort of psychological therapies, and a lot of intensive care units are providing that for their staff and stuff. So I guess, yeah, from the biggest challenges really were the sort of just pushing through, grinding, and trying to not get too overwhelmed by it all. But yeah,
I think that's what I think that's, even as teachers or all these people, we've trying to get on with it can be difficult, but like, it's kind of what else can you do, especially whenever there's people in front of you needing their help, needing that you have to put that front on to be supportive. But it's really good to hear that even though you're putting that front on, they actually are supporting you now in the background and saying, this has been overwhelming, this has been like that, what impact. It's almost like that, like, I haven't looked into it too much, but trying to look into the neuroscience of like PTSD and things like that. Like, it's what type of impacts has it had on our brain and on us, and having to get on with it as well. So yeah, it is good to hear that they're trying to look at it and see what they can support you with.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say about the PTSD thing, because it's quite apt at the minute. They've come out with a study recently. I think it was one of the universities in London that were they basically did a survey among the NHS staff in general, and the study was only published there recently, but they found that I think it was 40% of intensive care staff are suffering with PTSD since COVID has hit, which is what has urged most of the intensive care units to try and provide more mental well-being, etc. And I think it's one of those, yeah. So it's become it's come to the forefront of everybody's minds now, that because everybody knew. It's a weird thing because everybody knew. You can see. I mean, it's the same. Everybody's has very different experiences of this last year, different challenges, and there's no one challenge that is greater than another challenge. It's all very subjective. They're not measurable by any means, but yeah, it's a funny time actually to even be having this conversation with what's come out recently and the discussions around it. And obviously, I mean, we're talking about second wave, but it's really a third wave, isn't it?
That's great. Yeah. Even Rob were saying, like, it's like, but I think what we always talk about, because we've always had these conversations like over time, like over all the different things. So, like, I had my first year of teaching whenever you were around, and you definitely say my ups and downs of that as well. So, like, we've been constantly having these conversations about, like, and I think what's been really helpful is we did have each other to have those conversations, or we've been putting ourselves out there and chatting to people and saying, this is what I'm feeling, like, this is what I'm going through, and just being more open towards those conversations as well. So it is good that people are creating boundaries and creating little spaces where they can open up and share those things. But also, we do have to support the people who we're supporting with too, because I think for teachers, we're taught keep your emotions at the door and then move on. But actually, I'm having conversations about, like, it's important to keep your emotions whenever you have to support people, but how can you bring those emotions and make the connections who you're connecting with as well? So it's not just about leave it at the door. It's about what are you doing to be able to help yourself process it, and as well support the people who you're helping as well. So it's a twofold effect whenever you're so close to the people who you're supporting, which is teachers and doctors. We are very much at the forefront of those people who are helping as well. So yeah, no, thank you so much. I think this will feed through as we're going through well today, because it's exactly what we're trying to uncover. So do you think, for the first question, as we've got the thing, we've both been from Derry in the school system, so it'd be good to see what your takeaways are from the exact same school. So our first question coming up is, how did your school life prepare you for your future professionally or personally? So I think that really links into what we're talking about, is like, how did your school help you face these challenges that we're talking about, whether it was the very start of your career, whether it was like come up to now? Is there any takeaways that you've had that it did help you in that sense?
I think, it certainly has. I mean, as you say, we've both come from the same place. We've been through the same school. I guess the only difference that we weren't in the same primary school, although we knew each other during that time. yeah, I guess from a professional point of view, it has set me up quite well. I think we were very privileged. We grew up obviously in Northern Ireland, where it's free education. It was still grammar schools then. Still, there are still grammar schools in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. However, we sat the 11 plus, which is not what obviously they sat in England. And having moved to England, I mean, I think we were very, very lucky in hindsight now that we had such a fantastic education for free when other people would be paying for the same over here. I guess from a skills and qualities point of view, especially for my career, things that sort of stood me quite well was our school was quite. They were strict, weren't they? Yeah. It was quite strict, and they were very hot on sort of academia, and they wanted us to do well, and I think that set me up quite well going forward with medicine, because I'm still sitting exams. I have an exam on Friday, but you develop skills to pass exams, which is good. I'll come on to the latter half of that later. I think that set me up very well. Yeah. Other things, so sports, music, they all play into, I guess, teamwork, competition, because whether you want your kid to be competitive or not, it's a competitive world out there, and you need to have some element of competitiveness to really succeed. So yes, it has.
And I think that's a really good point. Is like, whenever we're trying to, like, that's a big conversation as teachers now at the minute, competitiveness versus not competitive, competition versus we all can win. And I think there, like you say, there like in times in work where you do have to, like, we all can win, we all have to work together, teamwork. Yeah. But actually sometimes whenever you have to be, you are your own person. That's why, like, in the next session actually coming up, I've got an MMA fighter who's trained me for my MMA fight. And that's why I really wanted that competitive nature of, you are the person and you're responsible for yourself completely. That it's both of them. It's not about either or. It's actually about both of them trying to weave both those elements of a person into the one space.
Yeah, I reckon that's I guess it's a very difficult balance to strike, isn't it? Because I guess over competitiveness can breed quite difficult individuals, and can often breed a lot of dissatisfaction in general, and that's. I can imagine as a teacher that it's very difficult to manage that. How do you? Because you do. I mean, you want kids to feel like they're all winners. You do, and I mean, from a sort of emotional development point of view, you want them to feel like they are winning, like they are.
I don't think that comes into what you're saying about, like, if it's only test-based, then if you're not suited to that test-based environment, then that might be where you're not going to feel success if that's all that you're focusing on as a school. And I think that's what I'm really noticing is, like, that's why I want to interview people from all different jobs, so that we can, whenever we were growing up, it was kind of like doctors, lawyers, teachers, midwives, and like those jobs were like your set jobs where you had those skills to become and get into those spheres. But now, like last session, we had like a digital transformation lead. Like, that job was not in our sphere at all. Like, that wouldn't have been on our minds or on our teachers' minds at that time. But it's still a person who's like 3 years older than us doing that job. So he's had to learn those skills and apply the skills he learned before. But it's, how can we learn what jobs are currently happening? And there is so much more out there now that people can achieve and be successful in their own right. So I think that's what I'm noticing as a teacher. You're right. It is difficult, but it's almost looking at what world we live in now is different and trying to make it look like that in the classroom. I think that's kind of what I'm noticing is like that, like those connections.
Yeah. And I guess what you're sort of, I guess what that comes back to is sort of transferable skills as such. And because I think, unfortunately, as you say, exams are exams they have to happen almost, but unfortunately for some children, they don't serve them particularly well, and that's not necessarily how they're going to succeed in life or even their careers. Whereas for the likes of myself, it's got me where I am today, and the same for you. I think it's strange because I was having a look around this yesterday, because as you could expect as a medic, I love a bit of research, love the bit of evidence to back up what you say. And there was this study, and I don't know if you heard it, it's called New Basic Study. It's an Australian study looking at sort of employment and skills and qualities that are desired. And it basically was looking at over 42 million job postings, and trying to elicit what exactly the skills were that they were looking for now, in comparison to previous years. And transferable skills was much higher now than technical skills. But I think that might be because technical skills like degrees, certificates, etc., are almost mandatory now for a lot of jobs. So they expect it rather than a desirable criteria.
Yeah, that's true actually. So it's like, and I think Keisha just wrote, we've got another, so like people can comment and like comment on our conversation. And Keisha wrote, I like the both versus either or. And I think that's what it is. It's like, it's an and conversation about how we can do the transferable skills and the technical skills. Because I think sometimes in teaching as well, like we're kind of like content versus like the creative side of things. And like, for example, like whenever we're talking about this, like even whenever you said you had the content of being a doctor, but like facing this pandemic, you've had to be more creative on like how you're approaching it, or maybe how you're dealing with the people that you're dealing with, how you're dealing with that response. And I think that's what I like about the and conversation. It's not about we're not doing the content anymore, we're not doing the testing of the skills. But like you say, if you didn't know about the measurement of things, or like the math side of things, or you wouldn't be able to measure all those things that you're talking about, anesthesiology and things like that. So you need that content, but it's also the and of the creative approach to the conversation as well. I think that's why I wanted to bring you on as a doctor. That's why my biggest takeaway is like, what does a doctor kind of look like now compared to maybe like, because even like technology and things like that, have you noticed any differences with technology in the sphere that maybe you haven't? And I think maybe that might tie in with the conversation of like maybe things that maybe you weren't taught at school, or maybe things that you think could be in education now with technology or with that kind of thing. What do you feel like you weren't taught at school that you feel like you really think children might need now if they even want to be a doctor, or if they want to be in that sphere? I
think in relation to sort of digital literacy and what you and Dan were talking about on your last show, I think everybody now has to have a baseline knowledge and skill of, I guess, all things technological and digital. So recently we do a lot of prescribing and note writing, all online now. So it's all on software, which is often not very it's not very user friendly quite frequently, to be honest with you. I'm not sure who comes up with these softwares, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, we do every single day. You have to use computers, you have to prescribe things electronically, you need to be technologically minded to really flourish in that environment. And you can tell the difference between, and I know you and Dan were talking about the last time about sort of differences generationally, and you can tell the difference between generations when it comes to this, because as soon as we introduce, so in the intensive care unit that I work, it's still paper prescribing just in the unit, but elsewhere it's all electronic, and we are moving towards electronic prescribing. And so I was involved with the IT department with that, and actually their sort of digital lead with that, which it's quite interesting then to be listening to Dan last week, trying to make it user friendly, trying to make it relevant to us. But yeah, you can tell from my more senior consultants, they're fantastic. But when it comes to the computer, they sometimes just would rather
not.
we took the responsibility with that
Yeah.
section, which is absolutely fine because they're fantastic in other ways.
And even that itself is like, that's a teamwork element, isn't it? It's like what strengths do you bring to the table versus what does what. So I think it is tricky because like, so you're just learning on the job as well. Like it's kind of like, can schools teach everything? I think that's what I'm kind of understanding is like, it's like teachers, as teachers, we're trying to prepare kids for their now and their future. But if we can't even comprehend what's happening now in your sphere, then like, how can we protect like help them for like the 10-year down job as well? Like it's almost like, what can we help them with now without even knowing what their job can be in 10 years time too? So that's like the tricky part, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. You can't teach everything in a classroom. I think the sort of the generation behind us and beyond are so. I mean, you see 3-year-olds using iPads, and it's second nature, and they're growing up with this fast-growing technological era.
It's that's going to be fluent to them, but what are they not going to have whenever they're, so like that's because we didn't have that experience, so we're learning as we go. So we have to find out if that's fluent, what do we need to focus on as like the content piece. I think that's like the important part is, what do you do with that digital space now? What do you do with that interaction piece? And I think that's like a really big important part of it.
Yeah, do you mean like social media? Even sort of what you guys were talking about last time, data analysis, those sorts of things. I mean, I think they're all going to be fantastic on Instagram. I'm not sure they're going to be so good on Microsoft Excel. But,
what do they actually do with it? And I think coming back to that doctor piece, I think that's what you can really give a lens on, because a lot of times, like I have a conversation with parents, and they're like, I want them to be a doctor. Like that's kind of like their dream for their child, and sometimes maybe the child is on board with that dream, and maybe sometimes that's not what they're on board with. And I think like even just hearing your perspective of like, we're teaching them these skills to be collaborative because that will help them be a doctor. We're teaching those skills to be in teamwork or be independent and think about their skills as well as the maths. So it's like, it's good to hear from you to see like what you said about testing, and you said maybe you'll come to like that in like in the sphere of what maybe you weren't taught at school. Like thinking about that second question, we've kind of touched upon it, but like that second question of what do you wish you were taught at school that you think you could have helped you later on in life? Is there something to do with like that element that you think maybe it might help with parents in that sphere?
Yeah, well, something that I thought about, and it plays into the exam conveyor belt per se, is questioning. Kids questioning anything. And that sort of plays into creativity as well, to creating your own thoughts, feelings, and questioning things. And I'm not entirely sure that was really, it wasn't not encouraged, but really, I almost wish I questioned more. Obviously, as a child, you're very impressionable, and you're like a sponge. You absorb everything, but to really form your own thoughts, beliefs, I think we need to really harness that with children, and create a space as such where they feel they can question things.
I totally, yeah. And
I'm not sure we've nailed that quite yet.
And I think, like you say, like we were very privileged to come from our schools that we like. It did set us up academically, and be able to follow the systems and things like that. And I think that is a pro, because you're able to like know what you have to do, understand what you have to do. But I think my biggest failure that I talk about quite a lot whenever it was my first year of teaching, like I'm pretty sure you were there for most weekends whenever I was like, Shane, what am I doing? Like whenever we were in London, and like in my first year, I was just like so following the steps, ticking the box, following the steps, ticking the box. I got this. But then once we got out into the career world, that's whenever it was just like, where's the tick box? How do I just know this? What do I do? Like, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And I think like you're saying, questioning the system, understanding where you fit, knowing what you think and being strong in your mind mentally is such an important skill for whenever they go independently. That I really agree with that. It's like, it's how can we get them thinking for themselves, as well as understanding what the system actually goes towards.
Yeah, and if we encourage that, I guess, obviously you're talking about parents, that's their dream for their kid. It's not necessarily their kid's dream. I mean, I was very lucky. My parents actually tried to put me off medicine. And we're are you sure? But yes, a lot of kids do, as you say, it's almost their parents' dreams to go into medicine, and that's quite a sort of historical thing, and sometimes quite a cultural thing. And I think that if we encouraged them to develop their own thoughts from a younger age and their own, I guess, critical thinking, then they can make those decisions in a more informed manner. And I think critical thinking actually is something that is just so important, and it's been especially important for me. And I think it's something I've developed more over the last couple of years than something maybe that was available to me prior to actually starting my career. I mean, it was I guess it was taught in university with papers, etc. But really proper critical thinking, I'm not sure I grasped that until quite a late age, actually. And I think that's something maybe.
I totally agree. That's something, being Rob, obviously being teachers, we talk about teaching quite a lot whenever we have spare time. What else will we be doing if we're teachers? And that's one thing I mention all the time, is that critical thinking piece. But I have been thinking about, like, with that neuroscience part and with that, like, what I'm looking into at the minute, that developmental part, sometimes I'm like, could I have accessed that? Or did I have to go through what I went through to actually understand it as well? So I think, like you said, how can we open opportunities to them, but understand developmentally where they're at, to be able to help them along the way to access that as well, to access that critical thinking. Because a lot of times, like, I had someone on the show in the neuroscience element, and he was saying that especially for teenagers, that thinking element actually goes out the window during teenage time. So we have to be the brain for them and help be their brain and help think about, was that the right choice? Because they're so impulsive during that time. So it's helping them actually access the critical thinking part. So it's like, I again go back to what Keisha said, it's an and what we're talking about, it's an and not a either or conversation as well. Yeah,
all rational thinking out the window.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think all those I just wonder how often, I mean, you're the teacher, how often do teachers and create a space or an environment where each kid gets to voice what they feel or think about something? Obviously, you're restricted with time, and there's pressures, and the number of kids, and it's the classic public sector, isn't it, at the minute, stretched and underfunded. But it's just an interesting conversation to really have about.
It is, and I think that's why I'm hoping, if I can go through all these different spaces, and because even like Dan was saying about he wants people to be able to think, and he's had to adapt, so adaptability and thinking and critical thinking. So if we can hear from all these different spheres that critical thinking is important, because sometimes whenever we're doing critical thinking, it requires you talking about your feelings, talking about where you're at. And sometimes I've had people's, like, parents have conversations saying, but we need to know the facts. They need to know the times tables. They need to know their spellings. And again, it's an and they might not see the value of those conversation pieces. Like, we're teaching them how to critically think through talking about their feelings, talking about their emotions, talking about what they're doing. And it's an and these are really important skills if a lot of jobs are saying they need those, and then maybe they weren't taught about them in school in the first place.
Yeah, I think, and what you're drawing upon there is actually something that I'd also, when I was brainstorming prior to speaking to you yesterday, sort of emotional intelligence. How does one teach emotional intelligence? It's very difficult. I can't imagine have you looked into that anymore from a teacher point of view, how you deal with
Well, that literally is where like this empathetic educators, like that EQ, like the empathy part for like understanding who that person is in front of you and trying to get there and trying to, because that's what it is. Your interactions create the people who you're actually working with. The interactions create whether you have a positive experience in work or a negative experience in work, and how you deal with that. So that EQ of creating those relationships, understand those relationships, understand who's in front of you. And it is tricky, like that emotional space, because it's not quantitative. It's not like, it's a qualitative space that you're trying to create. And that's what I'm hoping to get from empathetic educators, is through our qualitative conversations. I'm hoping to understand what we can do in a wider spectrum to say, this is what was said here, this is what was said here, connecting the jobs and connecting the dots. So
Yeah, I mean, I know, so one of my other friends from uni, she's a teacher, she's a primary school teacher as well. And something that, I mean, just talking about emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, things that have really come to light, especially for everybody really in the last year, regardless of your position within this pandemic. People are suffering regardless of what situation they're in, really. But with her kids, she has started doing mindfulness and yoga and those types of activities, which are just fantastic. And I think, you know, getting kids to access and recognize their own feelings from a young age is going to create such stable, sound thinking individuals that can analyze how they're feeling, how that is affecting each situation that they're in, and really developing their emotional intelligence. And we know now from functional MRIs, from other studies, that meditation, mindfulness, they're all helpful in, I mean, they call structural changes, and that we need to really benefit from that and take that forward and apply it.
Well, you heard it here first. The doctor said it. Doctor's orders, guys. They have to do meditation, mindfulness. If a parent ever asks why we're doing mindfulness in the class, I'll say Dr. Shane McIvor said the doctor's orders said they have to do mindfulness in the classroom. Then that's what I'll send them knocking on your door.
Absolutely.
It's so true. Like that's exactly what Keisha said, is like that's why it's so important. The empathy piece, like when rational thoughts go out the window, the emotional connection might help the interaction. So like if you are like, so say for example, say whenever, even in that first year, whenever I used to come to you and tell you like how I was feeling or whatever, and like I wasn't a complete mess. We'll not go there. We had some good. I keep mentioning this, but we had some good times too. But like,
we had lots of good times.
But like, you were able to see like my old person, like how I reacted normally versus how I was reacting in that first year, and we were able to have conversations about what's going on there, like what's the changes, like so the empathy piece helps you understand the person in front of you and saying, that's not their normal space. Like what's going on there? You question again, what's going on with that person? And like that EQ, and I think that's why exactly what you just said, the meditation and mindfulness for our inner self and creating stable abilities, but also the EQ to be able to understand the person in front of you as well. So it's like that those tie very, very, very much hand in hand towards each other as well. So I think that kind of ties in with like our 3 skills for what we're thinking about for the kids of the day. What you would say, I think you've mentioned them all as we've kind of gone through the conversation, but maybe just a little final takeaway in this session is like, what do you think the 3 skills or qualities that should be taught to learners for their now and their future? Like I said, you basically said what we've been doing, but yeah, just to kind of tie it together.
Yeah, well, as just what we're talking about, I think emotional intelligence, emotional well-being, we know ways now to teach that, to develop that. So let's harness that. Let's do it. Why not? It's not going to cause. It can only benefit students, pupils. I think as well. Actually, before I listened and watched you and Dan, I actually tried to answer these questions myself because I didn't want to be influenced by Dan's answers, but I had also written down about financial literacy, which was when Dan brought it up. I thought, wow, yeah, absolutely. We don't, and you mentioned it as well. We don't really. I mean, I don't think we really had very much teaching on finances, taxes, savings, all those things that are available. And I know I think that's fantastic what they do in Australia with the tax returns, and they give these kids the opportunity to learn about that. Because at the end of the day, financial literacy is now classed as a transferable skill. It's not something that you have to have it. Everybody deals with money. I mean, even senior doctors that go into management roles deal with money. Teachers who go into management roles deal with money. With schools, with it's in every single avenue that you're going to go into in your future careers. I think that's so important, and even from a personal level and professional, it can only be beneficial.
No, I totally agree. I think it's it probably wasn't at the top. Like, I think that's why I'm so interested in this, is like hearing from people, seeing what you thought. And like financial literacy, I know it's important, and I think it's very important, but not for me as in like where I'm focusing my energy. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, well, that is what they need to like be able to understand those spaces and be able to understand what they need to do with their money. Like like I said in that answer to Jan as well, like I just didn't. I didn't have that, and then I got in debt, and it was like all those things. So it is really important for their future as well. So no, I totally agree. So yours is financial literacy and emotional intelligence.
Yes, and then the last one, I struggle with a little bit more, but I think discipline really, which I think comes from sports, from having to, I guess, follow policies, rules, regulations. That all, I think that all plays into it, becomes integral to your own actual identity in the end. And I know a lot of that comes from the home circumstances as well. And I think it should come from the home circumstances, but I guess your schooling and the rules, regulations, etc., that are put in place are actually sometimes the only rules and regulations that some kids ever see. So they're quite important. And I think that's, well, I mean, I think we had quite a lot of rules and regulations. I don't know if you'd agree about that. But
I actually think it's like the and again. Like I think that's why this element, the last one was about growth in relationships, those things. And I don't know if you've seen like little. I'll put it up again, just like remind the viewers as well as you. Like, but that element of growth in relationships was like the themes of last season, and then accountability and challenge are the themes for this season. And that's why I've put accountability and challenge together, is challenging yourself, challenging other people, challenging like how you can do it, but then holding yourself accountable. And like you say, discipline is just so important, to be like, what can I do? What that's helping out there. Putting the blame onto people, yes, you can. Maybe someone else's problem, maybe someone else's fault, but what are you going to do about it? That accountability piece, what are you going to do about yourself? Because no one else can change what you're doing. No one else. That's what I've learned the most about all these different things that we've experienced over the past couple of years is, yes, it might be someone else's problem, it might be someone else's issue, but what discipline, what we're going to do and what we're going to hold ourselves accountable for is really important as well. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, accountability is just a minefield, really, isn't it? But I guess having any sort of responsibility growing up, whether that's, I mean, I think sometimes maybe we don't fully appreciate the level of development that it gives you. Even quite simple things like being, I guess, a prefect, being captain in a sports team. It's all responsibility. It's all leadership, and actually, I mean, when you're applying to university, you put all this stuff down on UCAS and your university applications and things like Duke of Edinburgh, and you laugh at the time, but in actual fact, when you look back, what the actual processes that you go through whilst doing that, you acquire skills that you don't know you're acquiring that sets you up in the future. I love it. No, for definite. I totally agree. I think like sometimes you do it because of it's going to get you through the next hoop, but actually a lot of times, like things that we did to get through the next hoop or tick that box, those were creating little skills for us as well. No, totally agreed. I think Keisha said, like, summed up very well: self-management, emotional intelligence, financial and digital literacy. Yes, that's exactly tick, tick, tick what we just discussed. Going through, and then they all very much all lead into each other as well. So I think, thank you, Shane, for your insights as a doctor. It's so weird whenever I say like Dr. Shane McIvor, I'm like, and then I'm like teacher Naomi, and we have all these people. Like it's crazy. But I think I'm so happy that you as we're from Derry and have like a little green theme for this one. I was so happy that you chose to have for our Global Light Unite our beautiful place. Where is this, Shane?
So this is Derry. This is the Guildhall in Derry. It's where, obviously, I mean, fun fact, me and Naomi are from there, but you already have worked that out. I mean, what a glorious sunny day I took that photo on, and I just find it's just heartwarming, isn't it? That, I mean, home really is where the heart is, isn't it? So this is Derry. This is where we're both from. This is where Derry Girls is set. The big Netflix series everybody loves, and loves telling me about it as well. It's the northwest of Ireland. It's where we both grew up. It's a fantastic place, and all the people there are fantastic.
I totally agree. That's why I want to have a Derry part of it, because I'm like,
absolutely.
I'm not at home, and I can't get home at the minute, and so how can I bring people to me? It's just selfish reasons, really. I'm like, I might learn something from you, but it means I can talk to you as well. So.
Do you know what? Why not?
Why not? But no, I love it. And I love the Derry Girls series. It cracks me up whenever I watch it. And some people have said that they've watched it as well. So yeah, that's a great fact. It's I think some people have said, "Oh, you're from Derry and they're the Derry Girls." I'm like, yep, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So thank you, Shane, for coming on and telling us all about what it's like to be a doctor in the 21st century and beyond. And I am excited to keep talking to you as we go forward. But I think I might actually get your experience on, might get you back on for my neuroscience side of things in this as well, so that you can try. I know it's not your speciality, but I'm pretty sure you'll have lots of insights in the actual brain side of things too. So that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
And so if you have any tips,
good to have some professional discussions.
And so if anyone's listening and anyone would like to join in the conversation, you can tweet it out hashtag 21st century _jobs and or hashtag empathetic _educators. And we also have a little reminder of our show that's coming up on the 20th and 21st of February with Richard Gerver. So it is that theme of accountability and challenge and change, and I'm trying to focus on that as well. So if you'd like to apply for that, bit.ly/Richard Gerver EE, you can apply to be on the show and actually ask him questions as we go along as well. So I am excited to hear more takeaways from people. Thank you, Keisha, for joining in. She's from Hawaii, actually. So I'm in Tokyo, you're in Manchester, and she's in Hawaii. So that's beautiful having her join the conversation. And so if you have any comments, let us know. And you can also subscribe to our channel or get the app bit.ly/educators app as well. So you can join us on those platforms. And that is the end of our session, Shane McIvor. So thank you very much for coming on, and we will see the audience later. So thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
See ya.